I think we are on air. Hey, so welcome everyone. It's Hung Lee from Workshape.io. It is episode 3 of the Recruiting Brainfood podcast, crowdcast, whatever one you call it. And today I'm joined by my special guest and hopefully future co-host, Nick Yockney, head of talent at a startup called Kalo. So welcome, Nick, and welcome everyone else who's joining us. And today we are going to be talking about workers. We're going to be talking about recruitment tech and why it doesn't why it doesn't solve the problems that we think it should or might. So you've been writing some notes on this, Nick, so I'd be interested to know what your initial thoughts are when, this topic first came up.
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone. Thanks very much for coming and watching me and Hung have a conversation about this. And it's fair to say as well, I think that if you have got any questions, just tap away in the side there, and we'll do our best to kind of answer them as we go through. Look, I think one of the main problems with any software that's built is that it's always trying to be all things to all people, and that's probably one of the problems that they have, is that every company is different, every business model is different, and most hiring processes are different. So when we look at kind of HR tech, whether it be sourcing or an applicant tracking system, or even kind of like the logistics, the stuff that kind of helps you organize and schedule interviews and things like that. All of these things are normally designed and built with a kind of generalist approach in mind. And I think that's kind of where the problem kind of normally kicks off, is that when you come to them as a user, you start to try and make these products or these platforms fit into your process, and generally there's always a sticking point within them. And I think that's kind of one of the things that I've found, particularly with using any kind of HR tech, is that you've got a set process in your place and you try and find something that fits as closely to it as possible, but there'll always be a point where it comes undone. So I don't know whether you've kind of got any views on that, Hung, but if you as a vendor, do you kind of find that that people kind of want your system to work in a specific way and you've designed it in another way, and it's hard to kind of get it to kind of do exactly what they want or in the way that they want it to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a person who's a vendor of software, but also as a buyer and user of software, I can totally see both sides of it. The tools that I like to use, I'm always feeding back, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? But at the same time, I am also aware that the chances are they won't be able to do that or make that change simply because they've designed it for enough customers to make their business actually work. And as a vendor, I've now discovered one of the things that we've got to work on is just this idea of trade-offs. Mm-hmm. You obviously want to help vendors, and if you do your market research and your customer development right, you should have an idea of what the main pain points are. But as you say, every business is different. Every organization, every user has idiosyncrasies, and you're not going to satisfy everyone to 100%. If you can get to 80%, 90%, something like that, then usually that's good enough. But typically, if you end up satisfying 1 or 2 people to 100%, you're gonna disappoint another segment of people who never wanted the features that you've built or whatever. So I think it is a constant battle. It's a constant balancing act, and yeah, I don't think you'll ever get a maximum, a perfect tool this type, unless you go build it yourself. And that's why some people do actually custom build and bespoke their own recruiting tech.
Do you think that we actually kind of touched on this before we started talking? Do you think that there's a move by businesses or by vendors and stuff to try and keep their product isolated from other systems so that you are kind of locked in? Because my experience has been that's it's very rare that you're able to really kind of get into the nuts and bolts of how something works and customize it for yourself, even if you wanted to. So you know, and I think a good example of this is kind of LinkedIn, where I think you've seen recently that, you know, LinkedIn have started any Chrome extension that actually pings the LinkedIn server will now result in that person's LinkedIn account being shut down. Which is
has that actually happened? I mean, I've heard some news, that you know people that they've been fallen victim to that. And I know there's a extensions apocalypse going on right now. Isn't everyone terrified about it?
Well, the only reason I know now, I can't remember the name. I saw a letter recently, which was someone had sent out to all of their customers, which basically said, look, the way that LinkedIn is working out whether you're using a Chrome extension is by whether LinkedIn pings this, whether the Chrome extension pings the server. And that's the main thing, is whether it's doing something that LinkedIn can recognize. But my point is that LinkedIn do not want to share any data or anything like that. So you're locked into that LinkedIn system. So I mean, I actually have LinkedIn Recruiter for the first time ever in my career. I've got access to LinkedIn Recruiter, but I don't use LinkedIn Recruiter for tracking for my ATS or anything like that. And it's completely incompatible with Lever, which is the software that we're using at the moment. Now, to me, you know, that's a big problem, you know, in terms of, you know, this kind of, you know, LinkedIn's great for sourcing people. It's great for finding people. Is it that great for emailing? Is it that great for contacting those people? The answer to that is no, it's not great. And so, to me, I think that's one of the major problems, is that how as a business, you know, look, I'm not expecting you to speak for all software vendors out there, but
I'm prepared to do that, actually.
But as a vendor or as a software vendor, how do you actually put my experience first over your, you know, keenness to keep me within your ecosystem that you've created, whether that's a good or bad experience for me?
The word ecosystem is absolutely appropriate, Nick, because most companies, when they start off small, they are the guerrilla fighters, and they're the vendor's best friends. They're going to do everything. They start off as Chrome extensions a lot of the time. You know, it's a single guy in a bedroom coding something up that might be useful to the recruiting community. It's when they get to a certain size and scale where they command the market, that's where the agenda shifts. So when you've got a company like LinkedIn that has, I would say, a near monopoly on the style of information, human workforce capital information, if you want to call it that long term, CVs essentially, but they've got that type of data. Facebook doesn't have it, Google doesn't have it, Amazon doesn't have it, Microsoft does via LinkedIn, but not many other companies at all would say that they have that volume of data. And what you have very clearly is a company that has a near monopoly on this, and therefore they're going to start behaving in a monopolistic manner. Now, I think there's a difference between LinkedIn and other software businesses, particularly younger businesses, that are much more happy to have a more open philosophy, and understand that data needs to come in and out of systems a lot more easily and be compatible. But I am ultimately a little bit sympathetic to LinkedIn in the sense that I believe that if any of these young punks got to their scale, they would probably do the same. So I think this is really a symptom of success and dominance, and it's not on LinkedIn itself or anybody else. It's literally a conflict between, you know, the needs of this business, which is to make tons of money, or which they can do because they've got a stranglehold on it. As you say, you guys have bought LinkedIn Recruiter without even thinking too much about it because it was you need to have, right? When you're in that situation as a vendor and your kind of service becomes almost like a mandatory product, that's when you start behaving in this monopolistic type of manner. So,
but don't you think? But I think what I'm trying to get, you know, and kind of keeping with what we're talking about here, which is why does HR tech not solve the problem? Well, let's be fair. LinkedIn has one thing that no one else has, which is lots and lots of people with lots and lots of relatively up-to-date information about it. So from a starting point, it's fantastic, you know, in terms of if you want to go and find a software developer, you know, whilst I know that I'm looking here and seeing that Tris reveals online, you know, I know that Tris will tell me that there are lots and lots of places that we can go and look for those individuals and lots of different ways of sourcing. if you were, if you're in a situation like myself where you're an individual, LinkedIn's quite a good starting point. I don't think anyone can argue with that. But the point is that their email messaging is rubbish. Like, it's dreadful. Like, it doesn't work the same as emailing. There's a very low response rate to it. The tracking of candidates, again, they kind of have this half-hearted kind of ATS kind of built into LinkedIn Recruiter. And, I'm not going on a complete, LinkedIn bashing mission here. But what I'm saying is, I think that most of these places, most of these vendors try and do too many things. They try and do too much, and then they end up having one part of their system which is great, which everyone likes, and then they have another part which is just absolutely terrible, and they are unprepared to accept that part is dreadful and that their users would benefit from being able to export that data out. So, with Lever, I have a Chrome extension, which I have to, it's not even really a Chrome extension. I have to copy and paste everything out of it, put the URL in, and then it does some magic in the background, and it all works. So to me, I think that's, so we kind of, when we're kind of touching on this stuff, one size doesn't fit all, and also trying to do too many things. So I've just seen Triss has just commented on my devs, which I knew he would do. When I sort of think about software that really works for me, one of the greatest examples that I have is Calendly. Do you use Calendly? Do you know Calendly?
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does one thing. I send a link to someone, they pick a time, and you know what? It never breaks. It never has anything wrong with it, and I can put links into other bits of software for them to go and look, to kind of go. Yeah. So if I use Zoom, for instance, for my online calls, and I think that's a great example of where that piece of tech, hasn't tried to do anything else.
Let me introduce one thing though, and I don't mean this in a supercilious way, but the best tech that you've ever used, that we all use, they are all single-use items that we don't pay for. You know what I mean? Google's amazing. If I want to find anything, it's cool. Wikipedia is fantastic. YouTube's amazing. Facebook, brilliant. But I ain't paying for any of that. Now, the big difference, where product changes, as a vendor, where the big kind of moment changes, when you think, Christ, I've got to pay my staff. I've got to build this. How do I charge my customers to a certain degree so that I can make enough money to continue building the products, but also provide this great experience? Very, very few companies have successfully managed to do that, which is why the likes of Twitter are still not profitable, why Facebook is still an ads business, why Google, I would even argue that Google have failed to find a relevant business model because they're still an ads play. For all of the stuff that they're able to do, the best they can do to make money is actually to sell an ads product. So the internet basically struggles to make cash.
But with the greatest respect, that's kind of coming off topic of what we're talking about here, which is pure HR tech. And
it's addressing exactly the topic.
Okay.
You mentioned that single-use items were the best, and I agree with you, but Calendly don't make any money. And ultimately, a business of that is not going to sustain because it relies on people being prepared to continue to support it. Now, eventually, maybe we'll find the solution in a completely non-capitalistic way. We're going to start seeing stuff that is completely for free. Maybe it's crowdsourced. Maybe it comes from the open source community. Maybe it's some other non kind of profit seeking behavior. But a lot of the things that we see that annoy us from software is ultimately because these companies are trying to make more money, and that's the bottom line.
What I'm saying to you is that if I look at yes, let's bash LinkedIn. Like if I look at LinkedIn,
I like LinkedIn.
But if I look at LinkedIn, like I don't see how it's going to affect their business model if I can take my candidates out and put them into my ATS. Like
let me tell you exactly how it affects your business model. Because once LinkedIn were bought by Microsoft, Microsoft have a product called Microsoft Dynamics, which is their version of Salesforce. And that's very clearly going to be integrated into all of the LinkedIn data. So they ultimately want to basically take a bit of Salesforce's pie. And if I was LinkedIn, I'm just playing devil's advocate. If I was LinkedIn right now and I understood that was my product roadmap, and I allow you to easily export your data that I've worked very hard to build, and then bang it into Salesforce, my competitor, I would probably be fired from my job.
So I'm not saying, so I'm not saying, what I'm not saying is, I'm not saying I download my 4,000 contacts into
you can do that, by the way.
Which I know you can do that. But what I'm talking about here is I'm talking about understand what you're good at. So LinkedIn's good for searching and finding people. What it's not great at is making first contact with those individuals.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, why do they not then allow me just to export like the 5 or 10 profiles that I want to contact? They're going to end up in my ATS anyway. Like, why would that not happen? And I think that's, look, you can't have the answer to that, but I think that's my, these are my gripes with these types of things. And I think also as well, just to kind of move on, because I think we've talked about LinkedIn for quite a while, that the other thing that I also as well think that, particularly in startups, and why recruitment and why recruitment kind of struggles with these different systems, is the fact that working in a startup, I think it's true for recruitment, is such a changeable beast, in terms of the process and things like that, and you have people that work outside of processes that you may have lovingly created. And we touched on this before we started, which was if you have a linear system like a linear ATS, and then something like your CEO turns up and says that he's met a guy at a conference, he's actually interviewed him already, and all he needs to do is to go out and have dinner with the product manager, and after that he wants you to make him an offer. How on earth can a bit of software kind of deal with that? The answer is it can't. And I think that's why HR tech falls over quite a lot, is because you're dealing, as we all know, you're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with a very human and very emotional process that sometimes will not follow the patterns. I don't know if you've seen anything like that with Workshape at all, with the way that users use Workshape and kind of try and do that. But I imagine you probably have come across that problem.
Yeah, well, one thing is true of all tech, is that it's always used in a way that the designers didn't anticipate it to be used for. Yeah. If you look at any of the technologies that that have become super popular, none of them actually started off being what they are now. I mean, YouTube. Did you know YouTube started off as like a dating app type of thing? That was what it used to be.
No, I didn't. How did you know that?
Similar. I was on no. It was a similar type of thing, like it was now, split screen type of thing. But no, of course now it's you consume it. Twitter used to be some sort of emergency one-to-many texting app. Facebook, very clearly used to be a way for Mark Zuckerberg to check out where the hot ladies were in the university campus. Users basically will inherit the thing. Even LinkedIn, going back to this as an example, when Reid Hoffman first set this thing up, he was very clearly, it was an anti-recruiter product. It was the first, hey, listen, no recruiters. This is all about professional networking. It's a better way to discover opportunities, mentors, etc. using LinkedIn. 10 years down the line, 99.9% of every single dollar LinkedIn earn is from a recruiter. So ultimately, products will definitely change according to how the user wants to use it, even if it is kind of within a certain segment. So
does that mean you're a bit damned if you do, damned if you don't, as a vendor and as a user? Because I do sometimes find some products, and I sometimes get involved with kind of people ask me to kind of look at like early stage products and kind of early seed stuff, and I sometimes wonder whether these people have ever spoken to a recruiter, about the design of the product and stuff like that. And do you think that more often than not, exactly what you've kind of discussed there, where someone goes, I tell you what, these recruiters, they don't know anything about what they're talking, they don't know anything about recruitment, they don't know anything about people, I know about people, I'm going to build something that's better. And then lo and behold, I think there's a good example. I'm not sure if I'm going to say exactly who it is, but there's a good example of a freelancer platform that came out, which was designed specifically because they hated recruiters. And lo and behold, what happened? About a year later, I get a phone call from a recruiter who they've employed, who is now going around organizing that platform. And they now have a number of recruiters working for them. So
dude, here's the thing. In terms of people producing software that recruiters don't use or because they've never understood the mechanics of the marketplace, I would say that's very true for a lot of the products out there. They're all built typically by engineers or by people that were dissatisfied by their job discovery experience or their recruitment experience, and they attributed their bad experience to bad personalities. It's almost like they had this view of, I've just had this horrible recruitment experience. It must be because these recruiters are just bastards. That must be why it is the case. But if anybody who's ever worked as a recruiter, and you and I have both been agents who've both been in-house, we kind of know the story. We weren't born bastards. We were made bastards, goddammit. The system basically forces behavior onto you. If you're given a target and you have to make these calls or whatever, and that's your rent, you're going to do that activity. Now, that's not me defending the agency marketplace that often deserves a lot of the opprobrium that gets laid onto it, but it is to understand what causes it. And it's a systemic thing. It's not about a personality. Now, when it comes to recruitment vendors, we are actually a good example because Workshape are a non-agency, an agency-free platform. And if you look at all of the recruiting tools out there that have attempted to do this, all of them have actually started charging like agencies. Why? Because it's extremely difficult to acquire customers in another way that doesn't involve charging at the back end like an agent does. So it's very, very challenging to try and disrupt the revenue model of how people recruit. We've habituated ourselves to think we're going to hire someone. Really, we'll be happy to pay us once we sit in at the desk, but we're not going to pay or invest in anything in advance of that. And I think that's a fundamental problem that a lot of companies had.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I can see here, I think it's Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy. As kind of said here, shouldn't a good vendor company be saying this won't work in your scenario and weigh up the dollar value versus the brand image as something that doesn't work? Is the responsibility with the vendor, or is the responsibility with the purchaser to make sure that that the software is fit for purpose?
Jeremy makes a very salient point, and if you care about your business long term, you care about your own personal reputation, and of course that is what you do. Give you an example. Yesterday, a Dutch company signed up to Workshape. Straight away, dialogue with him. What kind of people you're looking for? Sitecore developers. I don't even know what Sitecore are. I said to him, listen, you don't need to, I don't think this is the right platform for you. You probably need to go to somewhere. I would not know how, where would you find these people? But the point of the matter is that dialogue was dependent on me locally being there. There was nothing stopping me actually from him signing up, buying the product, because they were a self-serve product. So you could well have done that and maybe not had a great experience. So it swings and roundabouts. To Jeremy's point, it's how big a ticket value you can afford, because again, talking about vendor sort of numbers, it's very difficult to have a one-to-one conversation with every customer unless you're charging 4 figures and above, because every half-an-hour demo costs you money as a business. So that's why job boards typically can get away with $200 to $400 or quid or whatever. Don't need to talk to anybody, bang it, take a risk. But any more than that, very rarely would anybody pay you any money. Beyond, I would say 600 quid is probably the absolute limit before someone is going to make an inquiry, and that's when you need to do the dialogue. But that's where the prices start.
I mean, I can see people, quite a few people here, kind of popping up on the side, kind of saying it's got to be both. And look, just to address that, guys, I actually think it's about working in a partnership with any business, that you're working with any supplier of software. I think you have to try and strike out a good relationship. And I think that some HR tech companies are really good at it. I think other HR tech companies are appalling, and I generally feel that as they scale, they get worse and worse at it. And that's kind of just just kind of seems to be a standard thing. But it's an interesting one though, because I don't think that I can think of any specific HR tech product that I have ever used that has absolutely 100% hit the nail on the head. If we're talking about sourcing, I've been shown a lot of different sourcing tools, and I know this is something obviously quite close to your heart, but I have used and trialed numerous ones, and do you know what they always fall down is that they are not. I don't think they're ever entirely honest about what's in their system. In terms of, if you go and kind of say to, like, let's just take a job board for instance. If you sign up, and I haven't actually signed up to a job board for years, so I'd be happy to be proved wrong on this. But when I did, and when I kind of first signed up and moved in house, I think I must have signed up with maybe something like Job Site or something like that, and they will never say to you, they will never actually say to you, we've got this many active .NET developers on the platform, or we've got this many, we've got this many people, or do you know what I mean? There's never any transparency around it, so you don't really know what the value of that product is until you've paid for it, up front.
I think you're right. Certainly with some of these larger job boards, they get away with basically having a big budget and kind of the credentials of being an early mover into the marketplace. And of course, people might have some positive experience at some point, and that sticks in your mind. You might go and reuse.
Well, of course, because I think also as well, it depends what your in-house model is. I think where things have changed perhaps for vendors, and I'll be interested to understand what your viewpoint is on this. But certainly, I know that within within the in-house community, you have people who have a complete direct sourcing model. They will not go outside of the tools that they use. They will never use an agency, or when I say they'll never use an agency, they will rarely use agencies. So the cost per acquisition or cost per hire is significantly lower. And I think where these businesses in the past have perhaps triumphed is the fact that even though they might be dreadful for 6 months of the year, because the cost per hire or cost per acquisition was maybe like £7,000 or £8,000 because someone was using an agency, and it cost £2,000 to hire, to get a job board, or I'm making those numbers up, but you get what I'm saying? Like the economy of it, kind of is skewed a bit, because if you get one hire out of it, then you can kind of justify having spent, £1,000, 500 quid, or whatever you've spent.
A lot of this is about C-level commitments and C-level confidence, and also the quality of the internal recruiting team, quality and capacity of the internal recruiting team. There's two very critical elements behind that. It's whether the person knows what they're doing, but also whether they have the time to do it. Because oftentimes, I think a lot of people, most of the situations where internal recruiters have a disappointing experience with a direct recruiting product is often because they don't have the competence or capacity to use it properly. And that is a factor of them being overworked. You and I have been in situations where we know recruiters have got 60 heads to hire or whatever in 12 months, ridiculous numbers like that. That again, that's C-level not understanding what the optimal carrying capacity of a particular person can work with is going to be. But to address your point about, hey, listen, isn't it obvious that companies should use recruitment vendors and invest a little bit smaller amount of money on these tools and to build up their internal capacity and get away from agency supply? Yes, absolutely, they should do that. But again, it's about the risk factor. The higher the risk, it's basically shifting the risk onto the buyer. And a lot of buyers are reluctant to do that, even a very small number. I'll give you an example. again, a Dutch company. I would kind of see them doing quite a lot of work there, but they did not onboard on our platform, despite the fact we were obviously very competitively priced, because of a very strict policy from C-level to say, look, we do not pay in this way. We need to pay on a per hire basis. So the agency model, so to speak, has bled into the vendor world, but that, I think, is driven by what the tolerance of employers, really. If employers are going to pay that way, then that's where vendors are going to do. That's what we've been struggling. The one thing Workshape's been struggling with is probably that, because we know we could have made a huge amount more money by charging 10% or something. You know, we could even do a cost competition there. But we didn't want to do it because we thought, hey, listen, you know, this is the model that's worth challenging. Let's give it a go and see whether we can do it.
Do you think it's also sorry, I just feel as though we might be wandering slightly away from HR tech and why it doesn't work a little bit. And I just in terms of kind of just keeping with sourcing, and this is a point that I wanted to raise, is do you think that it's hard building a sourcing tool that works, you know, that's flexible to work with other people's styles, you know? So for instance, if we're just going to talk about Workshape, because I've used the product, you know, in terms of, you guys have a very particular way of that you believe sourcing should be done. So you don't open up the whole database to everyone. You say, here we go, Nick, I tell you what you're actually paying for here is for us to curate this into a list. But I can tell you right now that I've used Workshape and I think it's a good product. But I also as well know that my personal style of doing things is to start off really wide and to narrow it down myself. And do you think that's, you know, again, kind of one of these things with HR tech that's difficult, is that what you think is a good idea might not necessarily suit an individual recruiter's style, you know, of the way that they work, and how do you think you kind of can kind of, you know, address that?
Yeah, it's a very good point, Nick. What I would say though is that one thing we've learned in terms of kind of customer segmentation, so to speak, is that it's the same as recruiting. You have to go beyond just the job title as to what type of customer this is. And oftentimes the person may have the same job title, but he's not really your customer because of the idiosyncrasies that you've described, or the circumstances, you know, mean that he's not going to get the value from it. So
how do you as a vendor you can't really identify that, can you?
Well, I mean, you can do it through assessments and conversations, really, as best you can. But at the same time, it's not. I don't think the vendor is able to address that entire market that way, because it is the case that one thing that I would challenge you a little bit on this, Nick, is that I think you're starting from the premise that you believe that all vendors think they've made a product which is universal. Now, I, as a vendor, I can tell you we've not done that. We're very clear that there's only certain types of people in the market that are probably going to get value from it. We do our best to try and identify who those people might be, which is why we demo the product to everybody. Very few people ever get sign up without having to go through that onboarding process, because we want to make sure that the person who's coming onto the system is going to get as good an experience as possible. But
surely that's not, you know, like when you get people signing up for tools, right? I mean, I know this as well. You know, most people will sign up for a new tool when they're in the shit. You know, that generally is what's happening here. Like most people are, they've got all of their normal techniques that they use. They go, okay, those have all failed, and then they go and look for a tool. You know, that's kind of what's happened, because they're looking for a solution that will fix their problem. You know, I mean, I wouldn't kind of go and say, look, that's an entire generalization, but I would say I'd be pretty happy to kind of say that that most people will look for a new tool when they've got a problem. You know, and so therefore they're kind of buying when they're in. Oh, Billy, I'm just reading here. Yeah, Billy, I do think lots of people go and look for tools when they're in problems. You know, because if their current system's working, then they're not gonna change it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I mean, in sales, and this is where you might want to dive into the ethics of sales, if you like. But very often, sales is driven by need. I mean, if you remember the old school style of doing cold calling back in the agency days, you were taught to expose the problem and then amplify it, and then say, okay, if you don't solve and get these people hired, what's going to happen to your bonus, sir? You were taught how to do this and create this this sense of fear. So in many respects, the people that are buying the products, I would say some of them, I would divide the customers of WorkShape between people that are strategic, because I think there are people that would say, you know what, we have this long-term hiring need. We've got we've got these amount of people to hire, and these are the places where we're going to invest some budget to give us the best shot. But then you have the panic hires, which are people that, and we can tell straight away behavior-wise what happens on the demo. Typically, these are the people that have huge resistance at the beginning. A lot of chasing. As a company right now that I can tell you is exactly in that situation, but we don't chase that customer. We realize that, okay, what is it worth to us to get this person converted? We could probably make a couple grand off him, great. But what's going to happen is that he's going to be a doubtful user. So the guy coming into a product, if his psychology is not right, and he comes in there with a bit of suspicion, he's not going to treat the product with the respect it needs. And he's going to have a bad experience almost as a result of it. So the people that we try to identify are individuals that are thinking, you know what is the long-term need? What is the 12-month plan? Part of the reason why we do annual subscriptions is exactly this purpose, because we're trying to say, you know what, we want people to have these evergreen type of roles, always on mentality to hiring developers. That's where we think our product will be strongest. And ideally, you wouldn't take the panic hire. But as I say, we're a self-serve product. So you can come in and buy the product without us interacting with you.
I'm just going to say, mate, I think one thing, we were talking earlier about being the first show, we shouldn't necessarily try and deviate from the plan. But do you think we should see whether anyone wants to come on and talk about it? Because I can see in the little social channel on the side, like there's all sorts of people who've got different things. So
I think the only criteria to this is are they physically presentable? So I can rule out Billy, John, Jeremy, and Trish straight away. They're out. Now I'm only joking, guys. Anybody who wants to join, please just say. I'm more than happy to expand this out. I think there's 18 active users. So if anybody wants to join into the chat, please say so. Otherwise, me and Yokas are going to continue with the conversation.
Is anyone interested in being invited to show their face?
Well, I'll tell you what we can do. If the people that are can just comment, and if we see the comment, we'll invite them on. But
cool. In the meantime, there was another thing here that I just wanted to come back to, which was Tris has just raised a point a little bit while back, and we kind of shot through this tool conversation. We've said a sourcer should adapt to the tool, not the tool to the sourcer. The principles are simple: find people and try to talk to them. And I kind of just want to kind of touch on that, which is I think that's absolutely right. You do need to try and adapt to it, but also as well, if it's a completely different style to the way that you work, Tris, that's what I was trying to kind of get across was, if it's a completely different style to the way that you're used to working, then are you actually going to kind of get the most out of that product on the first go? It's probably going to be quite a stumbly kind of experience for you. And again, I guess I'm kind of coming back to what do people want? They want quick and simple solutions to their problems.
People, I mean, ultimately to address the question at the top of this show and what the headline was. The reason why Recruitment Tech doesn't work is because basically vendors are guilty of shipping it as a silver bullet. Yeah. And the buyers are guilty of wanting the silver bullet. And the silver bullet, by the way, folks, is a myth. It doesn't exist. And that's something that perhaps both the vendors and the marketplace need to both address. I do believe that tools are there to be used. I see WorkShape as a very good tool. It might be a more efficient tool than some of the others out there, but it still needs to pick it up and use it. And building the shed is your job. What we can do is to get you a tool that can help you to do it. Very few.
Do you think it's fair that vendors sign people up for 12 months at a time when recruitment needs might only be for 6 months?
If it's explicit, I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to make your choice. Ultimately, as a buyer, you make the consideration as to whether it's worth the money or not. Different companies would sell in different ways. Is it fair for companies to charge £20,000 to make one hire? Companies do that.
No.
A lot of it sounds outrageous, but really the problems are as a result of you know, what is a fair price for what you're getting. Let me tell you this, we're pretty certain we haven't got the pricing right on WorkShape. The reason why is because the companies that have recruited from us have recruited at a very, very low rate. And we know that some people have been hired and have been paid huge salaries, and we've taken very, very small percentage of that fee. But then we've got other companies that have onboarded, paid a decent amount of money, but they haven't made a hire. And they'll have that opposite experience. So the trick for us is how many of those can we get into the, you know, that magic middle? What's the revenue model that's going to make most sense for us? And hopefully that isn't going to be, you know, paying on a per hire basis. But, you know, I can see why a lot of arrows point in that direction.
Sure. And also as well, I just want to say hello to Audra, who's just joined on the chat there. I can see what about the vendor email spam problem? I'm not going to touch on this too much, but I think a massive offender for this for me is a company called Greenhouse, who sent me, you know, literally the most aggressive email campaigns in the world. You know,
as in sales emails, I guess.
Yeah, sales emails. Yeah, I'm very happy to call them out, and it's absolutely terrible.
Yeah,
like it literally does my head in. You know, so if anyone from Greenhouse is listening or watches this, stop sending shit emails.
Let me say this. I mean, it's a really painful thing for vendors to do. Email outreach is very similar to recruiting, actually, because, you know, in many respects, recruiters can often get very commonly disparaged on places like LinkedIn publicly for sending mass messages. We've got a problem with discovering customers, basically, and it's no different. You know, vendor discovery is a problem for buyers. Customer discovery is a problem for vendors. In the same way, opportunity discovery is a problem for job seekers, and, you know, candidate discovery is a problem for recruiters. That's why we're all in this game. We're trying to fix it, even though there's pain points. And of course, anybody. I think one of the biggest problems we have is, you know, these sort of drip feed style email campaigns that you're probably on the end of right now, which basically means I can pre-schedule 10 emails to Nick Yochney depending on your behaviors. Do you open it? Yes, he does. Then I'll email him again. If he doesn't open it, I'll do this. And, you know, some of these tools, again, make a decent amount of money because they can point to certain percentage increase of, you know, sales or whatever. But yeah, it's not easy. And I'm not a proponent of that style. For us, it's all about, as you know, in WorkShape, the big thing that we're trying to do is to build relationships with the communities that we're selling to. And hopefully from that, you'll be able to have, you know, more humane conversations about opportunities to work together.
Cool. I think I've kind of covered all the notes that I had written down. You know, I just, you know, at the sake of kind of, you know, not getting, you know, not kind of doing this to death. But I think, have you got anything else that you think's worth kind of? I think we've gone all over the place a little bit in some places, but I think it's been good. So if anyone's got any questions, now would be a good time to kind of fire those in, because otherwise I think we might have. Oh, is that Tris? No, it's just a comment.
Yeah, no, but he's actually right, because a lot of emailing tools that vendors use to secure customers have now been adapted by recruiters to target candidates, particularly hard to hire candidates. I mean, I think email generally is going to go away. I've got to be honest with you. As a method of first contact, it's still the safest thing, almost because no one reads it anymore. So you can almost, you know, it's much better than making an outbound call as a cold outreach. But the filtering is getting more sophisticated. Targeting is getting better, but, you know, there's all kinds of different ways that companies avoid the potential buyer. You know, is it ads? Is it email? Is it call? It's not easy. Anybody running a business, and we all belong to companies that have salespeople. You know, we also understand that without those guys doing the job, none of us are going to get paid. So not easy.
I think someone's just asked about Beamery. I've not actually used it, John, resourceful John, but so I haven't really got a comment on it. Do you know how Beamery works, mate? I
do a little bit. They're friends of mine, so open declaration there. They also pay me a lot. No, they don't. They basically are a CRM type ATS type thing. So I think where ATSs are going is understanding that prospecting is a missing link, if you like, a missing part of ATSs. It's no longer just about processing people that are in the flow. It's about making sure you're nurturing individuals that might not have responded positively in the first place. So in many respects, they're trying to intelligently do what we kind of have criticized a little bit, which is to try and nurture people from first contact into pipeline. I think they're a legit product. I haven't taken a look. They've evolved it since then, but a lot of people seem to get value in using it.
Cool.
Well, that might be about it. Does anybody else have any questions? I think no, maybe it. Well, we've been on air for 45 minutes, so I think that's
not bad first. It's not bad first go.
I hope everyone's enjoyed the chat. I've certainly enjoyed speaking to Nick. And if everyone's happy with this, by the way, yes, HubSpot can absolutely be used for recruiting. And by the way, talking about HubSpot, just as a kind of a complete segue, but HubSpot actually have a formal onboarding training, I believe, that they won't even allow you to use the product unless you're properly onboarded, that you then have to pay for this onboarding, right? Now, number one, that's very clever for them to make extra money. But number two, I think they've also learned that a poorly onboarded customer is likely to have a bad experience. And all vendors need to get better at making sure that their customers have success, which we've seen the rise of customer success people, more than just support reactive individuals that are going to come in and actually say, Nick, I'm going to show you how to use it, not only how to use it, but how to break it and get value from it. And that's basically maybe the future of improving relationships between vendors and buyers. Anyway, guys, I think this is about it. I have got to, I think Stephen has said I've got to plug something. I think this is a show that Stephen's launching, which is quite an interesting value proposition. The idea is come change my view. So the concept is Stephen is going to say something outrageous. And the idea is the people in the crowd watching need to mount an argument to try and refute that. Might be an interesting way to think about some ideas that we can't typically talk about. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for your time. Nick, really great chatting with you. Let's do that again. I think we could do it next week on Wednesday if everyone's up for it.
Lovely. Yeah, thanks very much for listening, guys. And I think we'll be doing this next Wednesday, won't we?
Yep, absolutely. So take care, everyone. By the way, this becomes a recorded video. So if you missed it or you missed bits of it, the link will be up in about a couple of minutes after we finish the broadcast, and you can go watch it or share it later. Okay, thank you, everyone. I'll catch you next week.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Yep.